We are in the condition we are in the state of ignorance we are in the state of war, in the state of economic depression, in the state of depletion of the resources of our planet because of the greed of psychopaths who thought they could create their own reality. Well, look at the reality they created.
You're listening to Sott Talk Radio, the world for people who think.
Hello, listeners. Welcome back to Sott Talk Radio. I'm Neil Bradley. Your co-hosts tonight are Joe Quinn. Hi there. And Pierre Lescaudon. Hello. This week, we're delighted to be talking with Gilad Atzmon. Gilad is an internationally acclaimed jazz saxophonist and composer, a member of the Blockheads, and he fronts for the Orient House Ensemble. His two novels, Guide to the Perplexed and My One and Only Love, as well as his political and cultural essays, are published widely in many languages. Gilad's non-fiction book, The Wandering Who, a study of Jewish identity politics, is a superb read. It's serious, but it's short, insightful, witty, really funny, and it's much needed to dispel some of the myths we're going to be talking tonight about Israel, Jewish people, and Jewishness in general. Gilad lives in London, and he's joining us today on Sott Talk Radio. Welcome, Gilad.
Yeah, I'm very happy to be with you.
Good stuff.
I'm always excited to talk about me.
Yeah, that's a great attitude.
It's probably, most people know the most about themselves. Well,
no, I enjoy because I really don't understand me. So when I talk to other people, you
learn something.
That's what I'm all about.
Right.
Yeah.
So maybe we can talk about you, and maybe you can tell us more about how you came to open your eyes about Israel, Jewishness, Judaism. How do you happen to switch and become, as you say, a proud, self-hating Jew?
Yeah, it didn't happen. It was an instant shift. It was a long process. People don't really understand Israel. They regard it as a very horrid, abusive place, and it is certainly is, but it doesn't look as horrible when you live there. And it doesn't look that abusive because you don't really understand the measures or even the history that is involved with the Jewish existence on a Palestinian land, because you don't even regard it as a Palestinian land. When I was a soldier in 80, I was a soldier between 81 and 84. At the time of the Lebanon war, I was shocked to see all those refugee camps in Lebanon, and I started to gather that these were basically refugees from the land that I believed to be mine. And I started to look more and more into those issues. It was only in the 80s, late 80s and early 90s, when people started to talk about the Nakba, which is very interesting, which is a very interesting development, because the Nakba, the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians, really took place in 48. So how is it possible that only in the 90s people really started to talk about it? We can talk about it in reference to revisionism. As you probably know, I'm very interested in Holocaust revisionism, and basically the revisionism of Zionism, it's pretty much the same stories, the capacity to revise the past, which is the real meaning of history. However, I started to realize that the Israeli existence was a complicated topic, and was involved with a breach of some elementary ethical principles. And when I was sure that this was the case, in the early 90s, I decided to leave Israel. But when I moved to Britain, I realized that actually the Jewish diaspora existence, at least politically, is far more complicated. And the more I learned about it, the more I realized that the Jewish left, the Jewish anti-Zionist network, the Jewish progressives, so-called progressives, are actually far more dangerous than the Zionist project. And the reason is very simple. When you deal with Zionists, and you really know what you are up against. They are very clear. In most cases, they say, we don't argue that it is very ethical, but there was a war. We were stronger, they would call it. We won the war, and we claim for a place under the sun. We don't try to justify it ethically, but we promise ourselves at least to be forceful enough to sustain this project. When it comes to the Jewish left, the Israeli left, for instance, or the Jewish left, which is an oxymoron. The idea of Jewish left is an oxymoron. Jewishness is a tribal identity, in most cases racially driven. As we know, it's not just that Israel is the Jews only state. All the Jewish organizations like JVP, Jews Voice for Peace, or IJAN, International Jewish Network, and so on, they are all racially driven. They may even be able to take money from Goyim, i.e. Gentiles, or to let them subscribe to the email list, but I don't see JVP let a Palestinian or a Goy, a Christian character, to become the secretary of their organization. So all those organizations, they are actually as racist as Israel, and in practice, they operate as control opposition. By the way, we can extend the discussion and to start to talk about the civil rights movement, the anti-immigration, the pro-immigration politics, where Jews were very involved. And I am now pretty much convinced that all their politics is tribally driven. They do what they believe to be good for the Jews. And it would be true to argue that I'm an opponent of all forms of Jewish politics, left, right, center. Today, I actually just put on my website 2 hours ago. I don't know if you saw it. There is an organization or a front in America. It is called Jews for Jesus. Have you heard about them?
Yeah.
And they just put a video before Easter where you can see Jesus Christ, schlepped to Auschwitz with a bunch of Jews, and the Nazis send him to a gas chamber. This is what Jews for Jesus gave us for Easter. They basically sent Jesus Christ, to a gas chamber. Now the idea, what they said, was that they basically try to convert more Jews into Judaism. I don't believe them at all. If Jesus Christ himself is sent to Auschwitz, what is the point of Jews being converted into Christianity? They will be sent as Jews. The agenda is vicious, manipulative. It is basically an attempt to convert good Christians into followers of the new Jewish religion, i.e. the Holocaust religion.
Maybe before we go further, you could define what it is to be a Jew. What is Jewishness? Is it related to ideology, politics, history, culture, religion?
This is very, very important question. In my work, I differentiate the J word into 3 categories. We have Judaism, I don't really talk about Judaism for a few reasons. Rabbinical Jews never been involved in any genocidal act as rabbinical Jews. The problem with the Jewish identity really started with secularization. It is the Bolshevik Jews who were Stalin willing executioners in the early stages of the revolution. It was them who stood and operated and were the perpetrators of the Holodomor, the mass starvation of millions of Ukrainians. It is the Jewish socialists who ran to Spain and ended up killing Catholics and burning their churches in the name of proletarians. And basically, I already mentioned the Ukrainian Nakba, the Spanish Nakba, and only then we had the Zionist ethnic cleansing of Palestine, which is the Palestinian Nakba. So I don't talk about Judaism. Judaism has nothing to do with this sinister operations. Then we have Jews. I also don't talk about Jews. Jews are people who are ethnically identified as Jews, and we will talk about it in a second. I don't talk about Jews. The fact that you are born into Jewish parents, or you have you regard yourself as Jewish ethnically, doesn't necessarily make you into a murderer. I talk about Jewishness. Jewishness is Jewish ideology. Jewish ideology, as I define it, is different forms of ethnocentric or racially driven forms of chosenness, i.e., we are chosen. You can call it supremacy. We have Jewish left supremacy, and we have Jewish right supremacy. It is always ethnocentric. It is almost there to serve the interest of the Jews. In that respect, I don't see a categorical difference between Alan Dershowitz and Noam Chomsky. They both do what they believe to be good for the Jews, and obviously they don't agree amongst themselves what is good for the Jews. Mm-hmm. But and obviously, there's no doubt that Chomsky is a nicer person and obviously more respectful towards truth. I don't doubt it. But now we get to the next very problematic issue. What does it mean to be identified as a Jew? The people who identify themselves as Jews, who are they? What they believe? What makes them unique, at least in their own eyes? The first group of people who identify as Jews are people who follow the Torah. They follow Judaism. This is again an innocent group. I don't argue that some of them. I wouldn't try to argue that they are all innocent, but ideologically, it's an innocent group. As I mentioned, we didn't have cases of Jewish genocide led by rabbinical culture. This is changing now. The second group are people who identify themselves as Jews because they are because they have a Jewish ancestry, either a Jewish father or even better, Jewish mother. Again, this is an innocent group. The fact that you have a Jewish father or Jewish mother doesn't make you necessarily into a zealot or an ethnic cleanser or a genocidal character. The third category is the category that I investigate, that I research, that I elaborate on in my book. The third category are those who identify themselves primarily as Jews, politically, I mean. So, for instance, Zionists are clearly identify themselves as Jews because they believe in the existence of the Jewish state as Jews. Chaim Weizmann, the early Zionist leader who later became the first president of Israel, said in the early 20th century that there are no American Jews or English Jews or French Jews. There are Jews who live in America, Jews who live in Britain, or Jews who live in France. Mm-hmm. What he really meant by that was that Jewishness is a primary quality. Now, when it comes to people like JVP, Jews for Peace, Jews for Justice, Jews for Palestine, they also, like Chaim Weizmann, believe that the Jewishness is a primary quality. And this is a group that I really concentrate on in my research. Now, there is something that must be clear. These three categories, i.e. the first category, Judaism, the second category, Jewish heritage, and the third category, which is the political primacy of Jewishness, they are not mutually exclusive. Most people who identify as Jews somehow fit into more than just one category. So, for instance, an American Jewish settler from Brooklyn, he could be usually religious, so he belongs to the first category. He has the Jewish ancestry, so he belongs to the second category, and he definitely sees himself primarily as a Jew politically, which means that he belongs to the three categories. If we look at the so-called atheists who form the Jewish Anti-Zionist League, they don't follow they don't follow Judaism, but they have Jewish ancestry usually, and again, clearly they see themselves primarily as Jews. This is why they're operating within Jewish political cells. So this is the story.
So, Gilad, there are comparisons to that Jewish identity that you've just described in three different ways. I mean, I'm thinking here of because I'm Irish, I'm thinking of, for example, an Irish American who is Catholic, who identifies himself as being Irish genetically or ethnically, is a Catholic as well and goes to Mass every Sunday, and also is maybe part of an Irish kind of American lobby group in the U.S.
Totally correct, and it is not surprising at all. What makes Jewish into a very unique identity is the fact that it is an exilic identity from exile. We can delve into it, but I'll try to make it very short. The Judaism, as we know it, was founded in Babylon in conditions that were very similar to 19th century Europe. There was assimilation. The Judaism, as we know it, was there to stop assimilation, to form an identity that would celebrate its existence, Jewish existence, in exile. This is why Jews are in the diaspora. They always feel that they belong to another place. Now, this unique exilic tradition has been developed for almost 3,000 years now, and this is why Jews, culturally, tactically, evolutionary, they are pretty much better than anyone else around in terms of exploiting their own culture and utilizing it against others. Now, you Irish people you are not bad at it at all, but you are way behind the Jews.
Yeah.
And the reason is because, are you Irish American or Irish?
Irish.
It's interesting because I'm asking now because I now learn about Irish slavery in America. So you definitely had a very harsh beginning, for instance, in America, and you were suffering, a total abuse by
course.
the end of, so
that brings up a good point. Why? I mean, Irish people have suffered at the hands of Americans, as you said, but also at the hands of the British before that. I mean,
I was just about to say, for sure.
So why haven't Irish people done the same thing? Why haven't they crafted that into a persecution complex and used it to take over the world? Why did the Jews do that?
The easiest answer is Guinness.
There you go.
You know why Jews don't drink?
You
know why?
Because they'll end up like the Irish, maybe?
No. Almost. Because it numbs the pain. This is a good joke. Now, it is very interesting. Why you didn't develop it and tried? I for a reason started with Judaism. Your religion is largely Catholic, and Catholic would teach you to celebrate your symptoms wherever you are.
Yeah.
Jewish religion is exilic, so wherever you are the other, you are the outsider. You can never really fully assimilate, even when they have the European. Opens the schools, the university, society. They tell the Jews, this is more than 200 years now, they tell European Jews, listen, be part of us. The Jews go as far as being assimilated Jews, which means that they maintain an element of otherness. Yeah. So there are some elements in Jewish culture that are very, very different from Irish culture. And I'll give you another very interesting, and I speak about it. I guess that a few of you read my book.
We all did.
We all did. So as you probably remember, I speak about the book of Esther, Purim. We have books within the Bible that teach us, at least one book, that every Jew, it's by the way, a book that doesn't mention the word God even once. It's a book that teaches the Jew how to infiltrate into foreign, into the host nation administration, how to manipulate the Goyim, how to make the Goyim Gentiles, how to make the Goyim work for you and kill on your behalf, how to make proxy wars. This is Purim. It's the most joyous Jewish festival.
Yeah.
And every Jew is aware of it. I don't think that you Irish people have such a festival that teach you how to make other people fight for you.
No, we just fight for ourselves.
I can write you one if you really want. I know all the tricks now.
For a fee.
For a fee, yeah. Are you saying that then that a lot of ordinary Jewish people, either in Israel or elsewhere around the world, actually know about this book and know about these concepts?
To start with, every person who identifies as a Jew knows about Purim. It's one of the, as I said, the most joyous Jewish festival. It's when you see Jews in the street, in customs. Every person in New York, I guess, know about Purim. I wouldn't come and tell you that every Jew on this planet think how to make Goyim fight Jewish wars by proxy, because this is the issue. I don't talk about Jews and I don't talk about Judaism. I talk about what does it mean to be identified politically as a Jew. I talk about political identity. And And I think that this is the most interesting issue here.
Yeah. And in your book, actually, you show how Jewishness is based on a fundamental psychological substratum where actually those people are not able, seemingly, to develop self-identity through personal ethic, personal objectives, introspection, conscience somehow. And it's only through the negation of the others that they're able to exist. So can you elaborate this point?
Yeah, this is, it's basically, to elaborate on it is to summarize the book chapter by chapter, because you raised a lot of fair points. The issue of negation is a very interesting issue in itself. I argue that unlike the Orthodox Jew, the rabbinical Jew, who identifies as a Jew because he positively knows what he believes in, what he follows. They say, I'm a Jew because I follow the Torah. A Muslim would tell you, I'm a Muslim because I follow the Quran. A black person can tell you, I identify as a black person because I'm black. And obviously a French person can tell you, I identify as a French because I'm a French national. When it comes to the secular Jew, we are dealing with a very unique case. It's like a secular Jew who lives in America or Britain, and he tells you, see, I'm not a Jew because I'm not religious. And I'm not a Zionist because I don't live in Israel. But I'm not American either because I'm slightly different. And they start to identify with a list of negatives. It is what we call negative dialectic. It is very hard for them to point at the positive aspects. And, and by the way, you will see people like Judith Butler or even Noam Chomsky, and they are obviously lying. They can tell you, I have heard Butler saying it, and I have heard Chomsky recently called for donation for JVP, and he said it. He said, we identify with the Jews, with the tradition of humanism. It's nonsense. There is no tradition of Jewish humanism. They are obviously lying. When the question why they lie is very interesting, of course. If a Jew is operating as a humanist, it is despite the Jewish tradition, despite the non-humanist Jewish tradition. And this is very, very interesting. This is why they identify by means of negative dialectic. Now, when people are entitled to identify by means of negative dialectic, it is not a problem. But the only issue with it is that you always need an enemy, because you are defined by your negation. Yeah, now, Zionism, funny enough, I see now early Zionism as the only positive, be ready to be shocked, the only positive Jewish attempt to look in the mirror. Yeah. They look in the mirror and they say, oh my God, we are a bunch of ugly people. We are usurers. We are capitalists. We don't produce anything. And their diagnosis was correct. The diagnosis was correct. Their remedy was apparently very problematic. And to be honest, they were doomed to fail. They said, we want to change it. How are we going to change it? We are going to change it by means of settlement. But when they started to deal with this settlement, it was a Jewish settlement that was driven by what they understood to be the Jewish culture. And to a certain extent, I would say that Zionism could be a nice idea, but it was defeated by Jewishness. Now, this is a very unusual point of view, but it means that when we are talking about calling ourselves anti-Zionists, we really don't understand what we are talking about. By the way, it's typical to the left to use an extensive jargon that the left itself don't understand at all. As we know, the leftists use the word fascism and they don't know what it means. They use the word anti-Semitism and they don't know what it means. It is so bad at the moment that the entire left discourse is actually change of empty signifiers.
Well, when you say that it was the Zionists that looked at themselves and saw themselves for what they were, what do you mean by that?
Obviously, I refer to the first generation of early Zionists, and I don't have my book here with me. I can come and get it, but I bring there a few quotes by early Zionists. You can look at Nordau, Herzl, Jabotinsky, Ber Borokov. They, in the late 19th century, early 20th century, they look at the Jewish condition in the diaspora. They see a bunch of capitalists. Borokov is speaking about the culture, society built as a pyramid. He says every society is built as a pyramid. You have a lot of working class and less of middle class, and very few bourgeoisie on the top, i.e. bankers, landowners, and so on, and capitalists. He said when you look at the Jewish society in the diaspora, it is basically a pyramid upside down. You maybe have one worker, quite a few middle class, and the rest are capitalist, money speculants, traders, and so on and so on. And they say we have to change it. We have to change it to turn the pyramid again in order to create a normal society. And this is where they start. They move to Palestine, and all those kind of middle class Jews, let's say lawyers and doctors, part of them are my family, you know. They come to Palestine with the hope to become workers. This is when they form the kibbutzim, they buy land and so on, and it is very successful. They work hard for at least 2 weeks, and then they found out that the Palestinians were cheaper, and this was the end of Zionism.
So you're saying that it wasn't those early Zionists, that they weren't necessarily motivated by a desire for a Jewish homeland based on persecutions, etc.
I think that they were. I mean, listen, I'm not. Herzl didn't come for me for consultation. No. So I can only judge by what I read. Their argument was coherent, consistent. Some of them realized that they were actually going toward disaster. You can read the writing of, they are a bit later, but by Gershon Scholem and Buber, who understood that, for instance, making Hebrew the language of God, into the language of the new Israeli is a very dangerous move that can lead to a sinister empowerment of the Jew. The Jew will start to think that he or she are God and will behave with impunity. And by the way, this is something that we see in Israel and the early Israeli politics.
And that's something we see in the Holocaust religion. So what is the Holocaust religion?
The Holocaust religion, according to Ishayahu Leibovich, who is probably the most interesting Israeli philosopher, he is not with us anymore, is the new Jewish religion. There is something that people have to understand. Judaism is only one Jewish religion amongst many. Judaism was popular for many years, but Jews this is the unique thing about the Jewish culture, they can manage to turn any ideology into a religion. For many Jews, Bolshevism was a nice religion, and they killed in the name of their Bolshevism, they starved in the name of their Bolshevism, they invaded country in the name of the Bolshevism. Another new Jewish religion is human rights. And as we know, the neoconservatives, and you are in France, you know BHL, Bernard-Henri Lévy, we kill in the name of human rights, we destroy nations in the name of human rights, we invade countries in the name of gays' rights, and so on and so on. Holocaust is such a religion. It has all the main structure of a religion. It has an institutions. It has a church. You know, we are building in every American city. We have a Holocaust church where we can take people to those museums and teach them about the primacy of Jewish suffering. We have Cohens, big Cohens like Wiesel, Elie Wiesel, and Abel Foxman. And we also have a God, the new Holocaust God, the Jew himself or the Jew herself. Look at it, you know, these people, this God was under such an immense attack, was basically annihilated, and look what did he or she managed to achieve. They are now running the West. They dominate American policy. They managed to get a state on the expense of the Palestinian people. We are dealing with an omnipotent power. So this is kind of what the Holocaust religion is in kind of, if you sum it up, but it becomes very, very depressing when you start to look or ask yourself what this religion promised. And this is very, very devastating. It is a religion that promised vengeance, revenge.
Yeah.
You know, we want to kill in the name of our suffering. And for many of us, this suffering is imaginary. I was born in 1963. And let me tell you something about Holocaust survivors. I grew up in Israel, and I was surrounded by Holocaust survivors. I had many family members, you know, with numbers tattooed on their arms. And I have never been abused by these people. They never ask us to go to fight or to kill in the name of their suffering. This is something that people have to understand. Holocaust survivors in Israel, you know, I'm married to a daughter of Holocaust survivors. I didn't know her father, but I knew her mother. She was a very peaceful human being, and she, if anything, she wouldn't like anyone to die in the name of her suffering. Quite the opposite. I don't say that Holocaust survivors were left-wing, not at all. They just dealt with their misery. The Holocaust religion, as we know it, developed by the second and the third and now the fourth generation. People who are tormented by the fantasy of destruction. And this is why I developed, I think, my most important psychoanalytical tool that helps us to understand Jewish collective psychosis, and this is what I define as the pre-traumatic stress. Yeah. In the case of the Jews, of the Jewish culture, yes, not the Jews, Moshe Chaim, Yosef, Sarah. Mm. In the case of the Jewish culture, we are dealing with a pre-traumatic stress as opposed to post-traumatic stress. And this is very easy to explain. The Jews are always tormented by a phantasmic disaster, a phantasmic imaginary disaster in the future. And this trauma shapes their operation or behavior in the present, and consequently, they really bring this disaster on themselves.
But that's not normal.
It's not normal.
It's not. But so,
by the way, I actually think that it may as well be normal. I don't think the Jews are the only people who are dealing with it, but I will give you an example, For instance, the fantasy of new Iranian Holocaust, the fantasy that the Iranians are going to destroy Israel shapes their operation. Mm-hmm. They end up mounting pressure on Britain, France, America with their very extensive lobbies. And the consequences, I think that we have managed to stop them, this, I hope, but it could easily bring into a colossal disaster, World War III. Mm. And if this would happen, how do you think a German or Austrian or French would react once a radioactive cloud is approaching Europe? What would they say then about the Jews? Mm-hmm. I leave it to your imagination.
But surely this fear, kind of collective fear of a future trauma or disaster is being kind of pushed on Jewish people, and they're being manipulated via that fear by their leaders.
I don't think this is very easy always for us to blame actions on leaders. I don't think that this is the case. Definitely not in the case of the Jews, because we are dealing with a very solid culture that is evolving all the time. One of the first things that I say in my book, that it is not clear at all who dominates the Jewish culture. Where is the brain? Mm-hmm. Is it the Knesset? Is it Bibi Netanyahu? Is it Shimon Peres, who is actually the president? Or maybe it's the ADL, or maybe it's Bernie Madoff in Wall Street. And recently we have learned that actually a lot of Israeli wars are there to support the military industry. So it's mainly maybe some tycoon within the military industry that push Israel or the Jewish world forward. It is not very clear, and we don't have an answer. But what we can really see is that there is a pretty forceful, orchestrated attempt that is there to sustain tribal existence. And this is why I came up with my organismus theory. Mm-hmm. I argue that when you look at the person who hit who ended up murdering another person. Who is the trigger? Is it the finger? Is it the arm? Is it the spine that delivers the order from the brain? It is very hard. Similarly, when an Israeli pilot drops a bomb on a Hamas headquarters, and he really honestly thinks that he is going to kill a militant because he believes that he is a militant. He doesn't see Hamas as a liberating, as a resistance operation.
Mm-hmm.
I don't get into that now. But he actually, there was a bit of wind, and this bomb hit a very populated neighborhood and killed, forbidden 20 kids. He may even feel sorry, but the day after, there is some uprising in France, and some Muslims attack a school, and there is a massive wave of immigration of French Jews to Israel, and it's a snowball, and this is operating as an organism. At the same time, that Israel is throwing bombs on Palestinians, we have Jews who dominate now the Palestinian solidarity movement, who are saying, oh, it's not the Jews, we are actually nice, look at us, we are nice Jews. And you are looking at it and you are confused, and you say, is it the Jews, or maybe it's not the Jews, blah, 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 blah. This is the organismus. Now, the good Jews in America don't do it because they want to help Israel. They may even hate Israel. They do it because it is very important for them to make sure that the tribe, the identity prevails. And this is something very unique that the Irish people, with all due respect to our Irish friends, and the French people, and the Palestinian people, and all other people on this planet do not have. It's a very strong and forceful tribal identity.
When did it start?
As I said, I think that it started in Babylon, and it has been evolving ever since. And 3,000 years of cultural evolution is a lot of time. So in kind of to make it short, it would take Edward Said. Edward Said is not with us. Edward Said was a very clever guy. He said, I'm an Arab, a Palestinian. I also want to have political correctness for me that would look after, that would take care of my interests and make sure that nobody abuses me. What did he achieve? Not a lot.
No.
Why? Because he was young. His Jewish competitors went into this battle with 3,000 years of experience, which means 3,000 years of tricks. That's it. So if the Palestinians want to get it right, they have two options: either to start to learn Gilad Atzmon, or to wait 3,000 years.
That's interesting, because I didn't really think that it went back so far, particularly because of the stuff that Shlomo Sand says about that there was no Jewish people essentially, and what you
I agree with Shlomo Sand, and that there are a lot of elements in his work that I follow, and actually I dedicated a chapter for him. But there is one thing that Shlomo Sand doesn't do, and it's very simple. And by the way, no one does. If Jews were invented their history, and he's right, 100 years ago, how is it possible that they were so successful in it, that they managed to invent themselves and to get a land on the expense of the Palestinians and other people, and so on and so on? this is not because they invented themselves 100 years ago. This is because they had the culture that was developed for 3,000 years that allowed them to move forward and to move forward in such a profound manner. But there is another thing that I'm not the first one to talk about it, but I'm the first one to talk about it openly. I think that this is the way forward, and I'm giving talks about it all over the world at the moment. I spoke about it last week in Costa Rica, 2 weeks ago in Switzerland, and next week I'm going to give you talks about it in Istanbul. And in a way, I'm delving now into evolutionary psychology, and it is something that Uri Avneri touched lately, and a few other Israelis spoke about. I think that the most important thinker that dig into this topic is Kevin McDonald, whom many people in the left, treat very, very badly. And I must admit that in the first, when I came his name for the first time, when I read the review, I myself, like an idiotic Jew, called him a white supremacist without realizing that I was actually exploring what is left of my own Jewish symptoms, and I then was asked to read him, and I published my apology, and actually I met him, and he's the nicest person on this planet. That the Jewish progressive left terror is something that they're really there to make sure that we don't read the most important books. Okay, this was a long introduction for, I hope that it was it. For 1,500 years, there was a massive eugenic project within the European Jewish community. They had a practice where the merchant marries his daughter to the sage, to the boy that is destined to become the next rabbi. For 1,500 years, the Jews in the ghetto, basically married scholarship with money. Now, there was nothing sinister about it. They were living in ghettos. They wanted to make sure that the leadership clever and can look after the community. It was actually a nice thing. What really happened is that they created, mainly in Western Europe, in Germany, a very small elite that was definitely more advanced intellectually than most people around them. Now, our Irish friend can tell you what they did in Ireland. Every time they found a clever boy, they took him to the church, and they told him definitely women with women it's not going to happen. Maybe with boys.
Oh. Yeah, you would join the priesthood.
Yeah, exactly. So while the Catholic around them was actually doing the opposite of a eugenic project, the Jews became more and more clever. Not the Jews, sorry, just a very small elite. Now, there is another thing that we have to understand. The more clever the elite became, the more stupid the ordinary Jews became as well, because they basically robbed all the very best male genes. All right, and integrated them into this elite. This elite centralized in Germany, Austria, and the Jews in the East were what the Jews themselves called, I say it in Hebrew in case you have some Hebrew speakers listening to us, what they called chotvei etzim beshoavei mayim, which means woodcutters and water drawers, people who are only capable of manual work. Now, the Zionist project, once you understand that this is the demography of the Jewish people in Europe, you can understand what happened in the 19th century. Once the ghetto wall were removed, these people started to integrate into European culture. And they did incredibly well because they were slightly more clever than most people around them. And within 10 years, they took over culture, banking, medical schools, politics. They became the most influential group of people in Europe.
Yeah, you see that in science as well. I mean, I think something like 80% of Russia's top physicists are all Jewish.
Look what happened in Russia once the Soviet bloc collapsed.
Yeah.
7 out of 10, the 10 biggest oligarchs were Jews for a reason, and they were all scientists.
And this,
now, this is very important because, those amongst you who visited university, we have this kind of an impression of professors being slightly clumsy or unorganized,
absent-minded.
Yeah, kind of actually pretty limited people. But when it comes to Jews, they're not just very clever; they're also very good in marketing. Look at Marx. There were two. There were Marx and Engels. Who is Engels? What did he say? Nobody knows. Because Marx was very good in marketing. Freud and Jung. Jung was definitely far more interesting, but Freud was way better in marketing. Look at Einstein. Look at Chomsky. Try to think if Chomsky ever said anything really, really clever. No. Everybody knows that he's clever, but nobody really knows what is so clever about him.
And could what you're saying basically about the Jews and the way they essentially genetically organized themselves as a tribe so that they would excel in society, could that be an explanation for why at certain periods of time the local population turned against them, or the local, the nationals, let's say, for example, and so in Russia?
For sure. There is no doubt that when you have a bunch of arrogant, very clever people live in proximity to you and look down on you, it's only natural that you wouldn't like them. But again, you make sure we don't talk about the Jews. We are talking about a very small group, a tiny group within the Jewish society. And then, go now on the internet and try to find out how many Rothschilds died in the Holocaust. And actually none. The only Rothschild that died in the Holocaust, it's awful. The only Rothschild, it was a Rothschild female who was actually Christian and stayed in Europe, and her Jewish husband managed to run away. So in a way, it is the Jewish elite that is responsible for a lot of the problems. Yeah. If there would be a problem tomorrow in France, God forbid, and I can promise you that BHL will be one of the first to run away.
That's for sure. And they will be the first one to pour oil on the fire and the first one to escape. The first one to run. And to be delighted when seeing these other Jews being slaughtered.
Enough. Exactly. Now, there is something that this is why I don't talk about the Jews. I talk about the identity, and I try to identify what are the elements within Jewish culture, within the Jewish society and Jewish politics that are moving things. For instance, Norman Finkelstein, whom I respect, and I don't think that it's mutual, argues in his new book, in his latest book, that actually a lot of Jews in America are moving away from Zionism. Now, he may be right, he may be wrong. There are a lot of statistics that actually contradict his findings. But this is not the issue. It doesn't matter if Moshe, Chaim, Yosef, Yitzchak, Sarah, and Miriam are moving away from Zionism. Because the people who push America are a very small, push America and dominate American foreign policy, let's say AIPAC, are just very few Jews. There are very few Jews. There is one Jew, for instance, World Progressive Network. His name is George Soros.
Mm-hmm.
George Soros, you go on the Open Society Institute and you find on the website and you find out they even fund every NGO in Palestine.
Mm-hmm.
They even fund the BDS. At the time, he also funded J Street, which is a liberal Zionist organization that opposes BDS.
That's marketing.
It's marketing. And by the way, genius marketing. Genius marketing, because if you really want to get something cheaply, put your money on the left because they are cheap.
Mm-hmm.
If you really want to buy a kind of a government, a military officer, or an academic, it can cost a lot of money because they risk their reputation. But a union leader or a Palestinian diaspora like Ali Abu Nima, what does it cost to buy him? Nothing. You just put him in Holiday Inn.
Yeah. Do you have any...
for one night.
Yeah, for one night. with breakfast.
No, without breakfast.
No breakfast.
No.
Do you have any evidence for this, what you've just said about the way that the Jewish kind of society or groups were essentially bred during
the Eugenic Project?
Yes.
Yes, for sure. It is called, in Hebrew, it is called Ashbachat Hageza. If you want, I can send you links to it in let me see if I can see it now. I can send you a link to it in a Jewish encyclopedia.
Yeah. Okay, that would be good. Yeah, because that's pretty amazing. Because what you've described, if it really happened, really does explain an awful lot, and it blows all of the conspiracy theories out of the water, type of thing.
No. Listen, this is something that I look for my bag. I can definitely. I just gave you the Hebrew name for it.
Yeah.
I'm looking. I can kind of find it on Kindle, but in Jewish Encyclopedia they speak about it. Recently, Uri Avneri wrote about it briefly because there were a lot of issues with the recent Nobel Prize. They wanted to understand why so many Jews managed to get to the top, and this Ashbachat Hageza, the race improvement, was discussed largely. But as I say in my book, there is no such a thing as Jewish conspiracy.
Mm-hmm. It kind of posits that it suggests that the idea that the Jews are special. It suggests that that's true, if only for a small percentage, because of this eugenics project.
By the way, this is something that I totally approve. The Jews are special.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know any other people who come to a land after 2,000 years and say, listen, you have to move. I've been here before.
Yeah, exactly. They're special in many different ways, you know.
Let's say it in Irish. They're not special. They're fucking special.
Special, yeah. But even to come up with that idea suggests a kind of a superior intelligence, even before you start your eugenics project, to come up with the idea of let's make...
They are special, and my job as an intellectual is to delve into their specialness. And by the level of aggression that I faced, whether it is Dershowitz or Sabbath going, there is a guy called Steve Randall that stalk me on a daily basis. But they don't manage to produce a single argument.
No.
Everything that I'm saying in the book is mainstream news.
Yeah.
How is it possible that BHL in France goes on TV and say I did what I did in Libya? I liberated the people of Libya as a Jew.
Yeah. It's quite sad, actually, because it's sad to see that this specialness, all those talents, this intelligence, instead of being used for creative purposes, is used mostly for self-interest and destruction.
By the way, I wouldn't go there. Because a lot of it is used peacefully. It took me some time to realize that I myself part of I'm aristocratic in that sense, you know. And I'm surrounded with a few people, a few clever Jews who belong to that unique sect, and they all use it, as writers and musicians, and a lot of Jews use it creatively and don't use it tribally or politically. But we have to understand that when they use it tribally or even politically, and even when they think that it is universally, the outcome can be pretty devastating. I'm now working a lot on Frankfurt School. People who believed that the right thing to do is to dismantle the West as we know it. And they declared a war against the patriarchal family and against the church and against the education system. And they basically managed. They were very successful. The peak of their work was the 68 revolution, and they've managed to destroy the West.
True.
They've managed to destroy the West, and they've managed to create a society, and they've managed also to destroy the left, as opposed to the unionist left that was quite productive in looking after the interests of the people and had a vision of society. We are living nowadays in a society that is into marginal groups, which is basically something like 25 or 30 synagogues. The synagogues of the gays, the synagogues of the Muslims, the synagogue of the black. This is identity politics, the synagogue of I don't know what. And all those sectarian groups are engaged in sectarian wars. And all the time, nobody looks after education, after manufacturing, after health. We only take care of idiotic wars about gay marriage. Now, gay marriage may be an important person, but it's not a national issue. A national issue is the fact that we don't have manufacturing, which means that whether you are gay or heterosexual, you don't have a reason to wake up in the morning and to go to work because there are no jobs. You understand what I mean?
Yeah.
We don't. This is how they destroy the left. And I came in the last few days to a conclusion that all those clever, very clever Jews like Adorno and Marcuse and Kissinger, they really kind of social scientists who believe that this planet is their small laboratory, and they make experiments with humanity.
Yeah.
And the outcome is always devastating. And by doing that, they actually, on the long run, bring total disaster on the Jews, as well as everyone else.
Yeah, as well as everyone else. Because, I mean, you look at you can't exactly say that the Jewish political leaders or in Israel, for example, and also in the Israel lobby in the U.S., the ADL, Foxman, and people like that, they're not very well intentioned. They don't seem to have a lot of empathy when they push their policies. It ends up with, and they must know that it's going to end up with the death of, for example, Palestinians or other Arabs. So, I mean,
as if they care.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, we've just had a question we have a chat room going, and someone's just asked, how's your knowledge on psychopathy, and would it be possible to ask you if the eugenics program that you talked about was basically a marriage of intelligence with psychopathy and power?
By the way, and I don't know if I'm sure that at a certain stage in the book I used it, but I definitely used it in the past and brought enough evidence to support it. When Israel, for instance, face a conflict, we have enough evidence to argue that their behavior provides some evidence of collective psychosis. Yeah, we can see a very clear elements of psychopathy. And for instance, the level of violence, the fact that 94% of the Israeli population supported carpet bombardment, the IDF measures at the time of Operation Cast Lead, this is unusual in a democratic society. That not 94% of the people support genocidal measures. All right, so definitely, we have enough ground to talk about.
It strikes me that the whole tribalism and keeping your genes together as a result of this eugenics experiment that has been going on for centuries, that ultimately, if people's empathy gets watered down over the centuries through their drive to attain more and more power, etc., that would essentially, through the genetic kind of inbreeding, essentially, that it would select for more psychopathic individuals.
I don't talk about. I don't have enough ground to argue that the dwindling empathic that is very noticeable can be traced with Jewish DNA or Ashkenazi DNA. But when I looked into these issues, I simply argue that the identity that is based on chosenness, this is what they are, is fueled by the dismissal of otherness.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right? So we don't need the genes in order to explain it, but if somebody is a genetic expert and want to deal with these issues, I would definitely welcome it. And this is the difference between myself and the left. Because, as it seems, it is Jewish progressives who actually oppose evolutionary research, while they themselves, the Jewish people, are the only people within the West who think racially, who are ethnically anthrocentric driven and operate as an evolutionary cult, while stopping everyone else from looking into evolution. And by the way, I'm not talking about Jewish race here. I'm not a race. It's an Ashkenazi project. And as we know, the Ashkenazi are not even Jews. At large, they are Khazarians.
Yes. So claiming a land that was left.
The origin is somewhere kind of 9th century Armenia, Turkmenistan, not far from Ukraine, actually.
Well, maybe you brought up Ukraine. What do you think is going on there? Is there? I mean, obviously we're hearing day to day the current propaganda going back and forth is that people in the east of Ukraine, pro-Russians, have declared that the Jews are not welcome. I don't think that we know exactly. I wrote about it yesterday. I tried to follow it, and it's not clear who said what, and it may be a hoax. But one thing is noticeable. And know that nobody in the West about the Holodomor. In the 30s, there was a Soviet policy imposed on the Ukrainian people that led to the starvation and the death of millions of Ukrainians. Some people say as many as 10 million. It was a clear attempt to annihilate the kulak, which was the farmer, the peasant class in Ukraine.
They were imposing collectivization.
This project was perpetrated largely by Jewish Bolsheviks led by Lazar Kaganovich, who was a Bolshevik murderer, Jewish murderer. Now, I don't have any doubt that the right-wing Ukrainian party is anti-Russian because of this chapter in their history. And in the West, we really work hard to wipe this historical chapter that is very significant for the understanding of the pro and the anti-Russian feelings that are involved in this conflict. Now, I grew up like yourself. Maybe I'm older. I'm starting to get old now. So I'm used to. I used to be. Some people here in Jezgig still call me young Gilad. I'm 50. I'm used. I grew up in a world where it's on BBC. This is the news. Even CNN or whatever. It is now slightly pathetic because every person who is even slightly knowledgeable about the conflict knows very well that the picture that is depicted by our news outlets in the West are totally misleading. And you know what? And then I myself kind of work closely with, in the past and often enough, with Russia Today. So I said, okay, I'll go for Russia Today, but they also don't give don't attempt to give a genuine picture.
No.
So the meaning of it is that we really have to look for alternative media, and I guess that this is the reason that my website and my writing are so popular. And it's not because I'm clever. The Holodomor is the biggest crime against humanity in the 20th century. Not the Holocaust, the Holodomor. The murder that was perpetrated by Stalin, by Stalin-willing executioners. This is how, by the way, Yuri Slezkin, a top American historian, as well as a Jew, identified them.
And do you link those people who are responsible for the Holodomor? Do you link them to them being Jews or not?
Definitely. They were Jews. They were Jews, but they were definitely not rabbinical Jews. They were atheist, Marxist, Bolshevik Jews.
And so what is it about their Jewishness that would lead them to carry out such an atrocity?
This is the most important question. For instance, maybe the fact that they transformed their chosenness, the Jewish chosenness, which is actually a nice thing, into an ultimate form of righteousness. I argue that progressiveness is the ultimate form of Judaism. What is progressive? It means that somebody else is reactionary. This is exactly the true meaning of chosenness, isn't it?
Being reactionary.
No. Being progressive.
Being progressive.
If I'm progressive, it means that you are reactionary.
Yes.
You see what I mean?
Yeah.
This is exactly what chosenness is all about.
Yeah, it's kind of this constant appeal to the higher moral ground or to the better ideology.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And
so I'm listening.
Well, it's something you make very clear in your book that behind it, well, on the surface, it's an appeal to universalism, to humanism.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it's manifest in many ideologies. It manifests, we see it still today, in agitating different ethnicities to self-determine, to rise up and free yourselves from your oppressor.
Yeah. But human right is exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
It's the image of righteousness, of moral high ground, and look what we do with it.
Yeah,
we already killed in just the last 10 years.
They would ascribe to the rather kind of colloquial expression of, to make an omelette you have to break a few eggs. You know, so in terms of putting their grand plan for the human race into operation, there has to be some suffering and some upset and some chaos, and they probably couch it in those terms.
But here's the thing, Joe: is there a grand plan? I mean,
no. Well,
as Gilad's talking about, I understand that there's no such thing.
But just in their progressiveness, if they have an idea for what...
You're right. I'm not so sure. I'm definitely, and maybe people like Kevin McDonald won't agree with me here. I don't think that Adorno and Marcuse and Horkheimer thought that we end up where we are now without manufacturing, with society being broken, and no, not even image of justice on the horizon, and so on and so on. I think that they have small ideas. They're obviously not as clever as they believe themselves to be, and we end up with total chaos.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I mean, in terms of having a plan, their grand plan for any particular situation, for Africa or for an African country or for an Asian country or for the Vietnam War, the planning behind those individual events is very grandiose. You know, it's rulers of the world type of attitude. And sure, they have the power and the means to make.
But let me interject. Maybe they cannot see the grand plan. And maybe they don't even have a grand plan, but they are not interested in grand plan. You know what they think? Maybe they just think of a small plan for the Jews.
Yeah, that's a driver.
Let's look. I'll give you an example now. And it's devastating, and I'm going to upset a lot of people. It's something that I'm really good at.
Good. Fire away.
Go on.
Yeah?
Yep.
Civil rights movement. As we all know, the Jews were highly involved in this movement. They're very proud about it. Fine.
You mean in America in the 50s?
In America, sorry, yes, in America in the 60s, yeah? Now, let us try to examine, and this is my new book, what happened to the black people in America? Okay, so we have a change of legislation, so now they throw them into jail without even seeing a court. 50% of the people who are imprisoned in America are black. And this is not just the South. This is all over. So at the end of the day, it is very hard to say whether the civil rights movement really made a change in America. But look what it did to the Jews. They became the ultimate instance and authority on issues to do with race.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right? So maybe there was no grand plan there. There was a limited plan for the Jews.
It worked.
It worked, definitely, till the next Holocaust.
Yeah, because
and this is and when there is a next Holocaust, the elite, the American elite, will be very quick to see it coming, and they will disappear, and a lot of innocent Jews will pay the price for the idiotic behavior of their Abel F. Foxman and Dershowitz.
Talking about growing pressure, you certainly know about the situation in France, this escalation, this growing pressure between Alain Soral, Dieudonné, this humorist, and French pro-Zionist elites. What's your take on the current situation in France?
I think that what we see in France is obviously a large process of awakening of the public to the devastating bond between Jewish intelligentsia and the so-called French left, and the success and the popularity of Dieudonné and Sorel is a clear evidence of this unique moment of collective epiphany in France. I take some responsibility for it. As you probably know, I am published by Sorel, and I know how popular my book is in France. And I'm very happy, and very happy that it happens. I hope that the Jews in France would be clever enough to understand that they are in a bad way and to correct their to correct whatever they can correct. But I also know the Jewishness is to a certain extent a form of blindness. And this is indeed tragic. This is indeed tragic. Instead of understanding that they are in an open conflict with French working class, they put more and more pressure, and they actually contribute to the annihilation of French left.
Yeah, and the pressure has reached such a point in France where only Jews can speak truth about Jewishness. That's why voices like yours are very important. Otherwise, non-Jews like Soral or Dieudonné, who dare tell the truth about Jewishness, became literally harassed by all the elites in the country.
By the way, let me share some of my new writing with you. What is political correctness? Political correctness is politics that doesn't allow political opposition. This is actually also the definition of dictatorship.
Mm-hmm.
But dictatorship is quite nice because you know who is the dictator, so you can meet in the room, just the two of you and a friend, and say, "Oh, I really don't like Hitler," you know. I really don't like Pinochet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah? But
Mm-hmm.
in political correctness, you cannot even meet anyone because it is you who self-censorship yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And this is an operation that has been progressing for the last 30 or 40 years. In fact, George Orwell was the first to identify it. This is the big brother. The big brother is imposing newspeak on us, speak on us, and we end up buying it or following it. But there is no doubt that the Jewish lobby, Jewish intelligentsia, Jewish pressure group were leading this move in our society. And what we see now is an attempt, a universal attempt to protest against it. And obviously, we are getting to the point where we identify the culprits of this move. For instance, here in Britain, it's the Guardian, and I started to call them the Guardian of Judea, and I can see how popular it is.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it gives me so much fun. I come to a place and everybody speaks about the Guardian of Judea, and I know that I'm the, that I should get royalties for it, and because I'm not a Jew anymore, I say, no, it's okay, it's okay. Oh, no, never mind.
That one's free.
Contribution for the
sure.
struggle.
Gilad, you talked about a newspeak, and today's one of the main sin, the major sin in this worldwide Holocaust religion is anti-Semitism. Before, anti-Semitism was defining someone who hates Jews, but today anti-Semitism is the word, the name that is given to someone who is hated by Jews.
Yeah,
totally
so you read
reversed.
my book. Yeah.
I did,
Yeah.
and I liked it.
Yeah, yeah. This is how pathetic it is. You have basically the left, and I mentioned it. I speak with you, and I didn't know where you're standing politically, so I was afraid that I'm upsetting you. Know that I might to upset you, but I mentioned it in the dominated discourse. When I say left-dominated, it's basically kosher discourse. We don't really negotiate with reality. We don't care about arguments. We adopted a Talmudic kosher philosophy that is basically a binary world, yes and no, good and bad. And we use a lot of words that are supposed to be a lot of negative tags that are supposed to eliminate people who fall or into these categories, to eliminate them from the discourse. So the left, the kosher left, the left is always kosher. To be a lefty is to be a Jew by proxy, basically. They have this anti-Semitism, white supremacy, Holocaust denier, Nazi, fascist, all those words, while they don't even understand what anti-Semitism or white supremacy or all those notions means, because they've developed a kind of a discourse, an exchange that is based on how to say it, diffusion of empty signifiers. They will exchange anti-Semitism for white supremacy. Oh, he's not an anti-Semite, he's a white supremacist, and they don't understand any of those terms. In fact, there is not a single anti-Semite on this planet. I'm going for anti-Semites, people who hate Jews for being Jews. Nobody hates Jews for being Jews. This has been defeated in World War II. People have problems with Jewish politics, with Jewish identity politics, with Zionism, with anti-Zionist deceit, with George Soros, with control opposition. They have problem with it, and it's legitimate. Because Jews are involved in politics, and every form of politics should be subject to criticism.
Absolutely.
The fact that Jews don't want to be criticized for the politics only proves that they are supremacists chosen. They want to be special. White supremacists, not a single person who is tagged by the left as a white supremacist see himself or herself as a white supremacist. Looked into, a character that they really hate, David Duke. David Duke is not a white supremacist. David Duke actually argues, if I understand it correctly, and I'm prone to make mistakes, David Duke actually argues, and I read his articles about it because I was asked about it, and he's an interesting character. He is a white right campaigner, and in his writings, and I can find it again, he actually argues that every people have the right to celebrate their cultural heritage, including Jews. But he thinks that as a white man who loves his culture, and by the way, there is a lot of things to love in white culture. I'm a musician, What about Bach, Beethoven? And I'm also a philosopher. What about Kant, Schopenhauer, and Heidegger? I'm sorry that they're all Germans. I don't know. Where are they? Yeah, try to think. Yeah, and there are a lot of things that are precious for us. So, if I have the right to celebrate my symptom, let's say as a Muslim or as a Jew, he also has the same right. Now, it doesn't make him into a white supremacist. And if he is a white supremacist, so every person is a kind of a supremacist. So it's not bad. And the left is not capable. And it's tragic. It's tragic. I don't know about you, but most of the people I know were leftists at a certain stage. Because we believed in ethics, and we believed that left was motivated by ethical thought. And I really don't find any form of reasoning and ethical thinking in the left anymore. And it's very sad for me. Yeah. But I blame, by the way, Frankfurt School and the division of our culture into this is something very interesting, and just think about it for a second. In the old left, the left, I allow myself to say we grew up with, but I don't know about you, but a lot of myself and others, it didn't matter if you are a gay, if you are a black, if you are a Jew, if you are a Muslim. The only thing that mattered was your role within the production chain. So if you were a worker, you were my brother. In the new left, we are divided into men, women, gays, heterosexual, Jews, black.
Animal rights.
We are differentiated by biology. The new left adopted the most biological determinist philosophy that is the most radical form of Nazism, which is actually not Nazism, it's Hitlerism. And they don't even understand it because they are not engaged in exchange. They build themselves, these departments in universities where they have gay studies, women's studies, studies, and they negotiate within themselves. If somebody tries to suggest a critical argument, they immediately, rather than exchanging, they would tag him as a white supremacist or an anti-Semite. So they can continue, or male chauvinist. They have this tag. So they can continue this endless party that made them totally irrelevant to the world we are living in.
Yeah. Gilad, we might have a call here. I'm just going to check to see if we've got a call. Do we have a caller on the line?
Yes, sir.
Hello. Hi, what's your name and where are you calling from? Yeah.
My name is Jamar, and I'm calling from Tacoma.
Hi, Jamar. Do you have a question or a comment for Gilad? Or?
Yeah, well, a comment and a question. A question to the guy, because he brought up David Duke. And it could be my emotions, but I'm young, but I thought David Duke might have been a little bit of a racist, but I can't be wrong. You know, and maybe he can correct me on the philosophy of David Duke, because I don't know. I got a little bad feeling about him, you know, because I've read some things that he said, and also Laura says something about, like, you know, it doesn't matter the color you are, just the soul that occupies the body, you know. So, you know, that stuff kind of gets me a little bit when I hear certain things that's racial, because, you know, things about the Jews and stuff, like, we know that, but then, like, when you read the book 9/11, The Ultimate Truth, at the end, you get the big conclusion. You get the big payoff, as in, like, the Jews are really the ones that are being taken, you know, and then the people who accuse you guys of doing certain things or being anti-Semitic or something, they didn't read that last chapter in that book, evidently, you know. So I would just get into that. And also, another thing I want to say is also Vladimir Putin is really, really doing his thing for the last, you know, month or two. Like, he's doing a great job, and, you know, he's making everybody look dumb who is inept and, you know, psychopathic people in positions of power, and they're not. The greed is a sickness, and you could tell that they're being greedy and they're making many mistakes, and other people are aligning with each other. And, you know, sooner or later, people, you know, agree to get along with each other and go against the bully. And I think the United States right now is the bully, and it's Germany all over again. But that's all.
Yeah. Okay, Jamar, thanks for your question.
Thanks, Jamar. So, Gilad,
you know, I will just concentrate on the first two questions or comments. It is I'm not working yet for David Duke, and I think that he is clever enough to represent his case. It is known that David Duke, as a youngster, was involved with the Ku Klux Klan, and he was actually in a position of he was a leader, as far as I know. But I want to remind your listeners that at the same age, I myself was an IDF soldier, and I was participating in a war as a soldier, and the army that I was involved with killed more than 20,000 civilians and got away with it. And I actually volunteered to be in this army and in the unit I was in, and still everybody forgive me. And we were racist, and we were murderers.
Well,
so this is very interesting. And the next question: why everybody forgives me? Because I was a Jew. So we are special. We are special. Now, I don't know enough about David Duke and his politics, and I'm not really interested in his politics. What is interesting for me, I'm an intellectual, so I read Adolf Hitler, Mein Kampf, and the Zweine book, the second book, and I learned a lot. And I read the Bell Curve again this week, and I learned a lot. And I read Kevin McDonald, and I read and I learned a lot, and I learned a lot. And why I learned a lot? Because David Duke is not afraid to think about himself as a racial term. I was shocked that to find out that David Duke, who is definitely not a Jew and doesn't look like a Jew and doesn't operate as a Jew, he has nothing to do with the Jews, knows about the Jews more than me, and I'm a scholar, and definitely more than most Jews, and the reason is very simple. Because I wasn't allowed to think about myself as a racist. I was a racist, but I wasn't allowed to think about myself as such. And because he's allowing himself to think in racial terms, he actually understands the Jews better than the Jews. And this is why the Jews are so worried about him and his soul. So it's very, very interesting.
Well, you know,
Right?
it is kind of interesting because just mentioning David Duke, you probably know about the academic boycott of Israel, right? And the whole university college union stuff that's been going on in the UK for a long time, where it's basically where British universities are launching a boycott, an academic boycott against, etc. But in 2008. The boycott that year, where they have a vote of whether or not they're going to boycott every year. And in 2008, there was a bit of there's a scandal every year over it. But in 2008, there was a scandal because there was a member of the University College Union. Her name was Jenna Dillich, I think, and she passed around amongst the members of the University College Union on their email list. She passed around an article that I wrote called Racism. What was it called again? Where is it here? Racism, Not Defense, at the Heart of Israeli Politics. And she passed that around, and she got totally slammed. And the whole anti-academic boycott gang, the Jewish lobby essentially in the UK, jumped on this and said that she was passing around anti-Semitic material. But the main argument they had was that David Duke had taken that article that I wrote and posted it on his website. And they used that as evidence. They weren't really attacking me. They were attacking her because she had taken it supposedly from David Duke's website.
This is, let me tell you something. Boycott is actually a Jewish trick. We call it cherem. We call it cherem in Hebrew. And it's a Jewish culture. We did it to Spinoza. We did it to Uriel de Costa. And we did it all through our history. This is what Jews are good at, doing boycotts. And now they even managed to make the Palestinians into Jews. And you know what? The Palestinians are not even involved anymore. They just told the Jews, okay, you take care of the boycott. They have a Palestinian in Ramallah. His name is Omar Barghouti. He's kind of the coordinator of the boycott, and he himself went to study in Tel Aviv University.
Why would the Jews be boycotting themselves?
Because it gives the impression that they are ethically driven. And by the way, I'm not against the boycott.
No.
I'm not against the boycott, but as you said here, they boycott Norman Finkelstein, who is the most eloquent, the best speaker for Palestine in English. Whether we agree with him or not, it doesn't matter. They boycott Greta Berlin. They boycott George Galloway. They boycott basically the most important thinkers in this movement. Can you think of any Israeli whom they boycotted? Not really. You know? So basically they work for the Jews, and they do what the Jews believe to be good for the Jews. That's it. So this is the boycott. And David Duke is indeed very frightening for some Jews because he understands few things that they would really prefer to shove under the carpet. So, I cannot really defend this past. It's really none of my business, I, by the way, cannot defend my past either. It's very embarrassing, but I can't. I try to to deal with it, but I can't. And still I learn a lot from him. I learned a lot from him. And as I said, I learned a lot from the book that they really insist we don't read.
Yeah. Gilad, allow me to go back to the Frankfurt School. I have a comment here. I might be wrong. There seems to be a growing effort to destroy the sources of our reference of our culture. Destruction of the nation state, destruction of the family, destruction of art. All what contributes, what helps us to define ourselves as human beings, what shapes our conscience. It's as if those individuals are to define us lacking this conscience, this self-identity backbone, are creating a world where us, human beings with a conscience, would be forced, because of suppression of those cultural reference, to lose our conscience. So are we onto something here?
And I think that you defined it very well. I think that those Jewish thinkers thought that destroy the West and every characteristic of the West, and as you mentioned, it is our history, our culture, our education, our patriarchal family, our church, our religion, everything would contribute to a better society. This is one option. This is the grand narrative. What was very clear that they believed that it would be good for the Jews, because if you don't have culture, and if you don't have heritage, and if you don't have art, and if you don't have patriarchal family, and the church is gone, so the Jew is like everyone else. We reduce the entire society into uprooted tabula rasa, empty brain. And this is exactly where we are. We have managed to destroy the intelligentsia, and now we are basically all equally stupid. But you know what is the problem with it? When there are people who are genuinely clever, they don't even remember how to silence them. And I'm laughing at it. I see the campaigns to silence me, and I'm way ahead of them.
Yeah. We have another call on the line here, Gilad. Hi, do we have a caller?
Yeah.
Hi.
Yeah, Kent from West.
What's your name? Go ahead.
Yeah, Kent from West Virginia, and you were talking about the boycott and the boycott program and the disinvestment or divestiture programs, BDS they call it. I've thought for quite some time now that actually if the United States would just declare support for Israel unconstitutional, because it being a Jewish state, we have a clause in our Constitution that forbids the establishment of religion. And if there ever was a case where a religion was established, that is it. And it's being done for a small section of the American population. And I know Gilad probably knows somebody in the people in the United States that maybe could pursue that. It's simply unconstitutional to support a religious state for a group of Americans, even if it is outside the country, because they've given it to people in Guantanamo. So I just wanted to pass that idea on to him and see maybe he could advance it with some of his friends.
Okay.
It's a very, 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 very good point, because it could have been, what is BDS? BDS is boycott, divestment, and sanctions. Now, boycott doesn't mean anything really. As I mentioned, they managed to boycott every good person that support the Palestinians but we cannot even think of a single Israeli who was boycotted by in the last 1 or 2, 3 last 3 years. Divestment is not an issue because nobody understands what it means. Even English people, American people have to take a dictionary and it doesn't help. The most important issue is sanctions. Sanctions.
Yeah.
With sanctions, you can destroy countries. Iraq was destroyed by sanctions. Iran was destroyed by sanctions. But when it comes to Israel, the BDS doesn't do a thing to push for sanctions. And why? Because the Jews that dominate this movement don't really want to destroy Israel. They want to give the impression that we have some nice Jews that don't agree with Israel, and that's it. And it is not a coincidence that we have a Palestinian struggling for 100 years. For the first 70, 80 years, we saw kind of a struggle, and in the last 10, 15 years, since the Jews basically took over, the good Jews, so-called, we call them the AZZ, as the anti-Zionist Zionists took over, it's basically finito della commedia. That's it. It's over. Now, looking at it from a completely different perspective, maybe this is good for the Palestinians, at least in Israel, or maybe even in the West Bank. Maybe they are moving, maybe the fact that the Palestinians are now defeated, and this is how it looks, maybe it is safer for them rather than engage in a suicidal attempt. But this gentleman who just called is correct. It's unconstitutional. It should have been quite easy to deal with it legally and constitutionally, but the people who are dominating this discourse don't do it. By the way, the last month I went to listen to a Professor Richard Falk talking about human rights in the context of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And he also said it's quite peculiar that the Palestinians don't pursue the Hague and the International Court of Justice now that they are kind of managed to gain the status of a state. Because they definitely have the legal international law in their side, and they don't. And they don't because their discourse and their operation is dominated by people who are, so to say, presenting or working for Jewish interests. And as I mentioned, the fact that George Soros, a liberal Zionist, funds every NGO in Palestine has something to do with it.
Is that it, Kent?
Yeah, that's it. Thanks. Yeah.
All right. Thanks for the call.
Thanks for calling.
Thank you.
Okay. So we were just discussing there just in the last minute or two since we came back about all of the people who have surprisingly have come out and criticized you and condemned you. There's very few people, even amongst all of the anti-Zionist, pro-Palestinian groups, who had a good word to say. There's very few who had a good word to say about your book.
No,
they're wondering who.
This is clear. I've never seen an argument against my work. They basically say, we don't want you to say it. It's not going to work. I'll say it, and I'll use the opposition against me to prove that some people, both Palestinians, not a lot of Palestinians, we know of 20 Palestinians, and that only 2 or 3 of them are known figures. I'm very happy to be chased. My big fear is that one day they give up
They'll stop talking about you.
Fighting. Yeah, it would be very devastating.
Well, I think you mentioned Richard Falk, and I think he is the one who actually probably summed up your work the best. He said, and you the best. He said that you were a de-Zionized patriot of humanity. Is that true?
It will say that it is. It would make me into a righteous Jew.
Yeah. Uh-oh.
No,
you can't say anything about yourself, good or bad.
Exactly. I think that that I'm basically a philosopher, and I'm really very good in refining questions. And I do believe that once you refine the question, you understand what is the question, you can come up with good answer.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And actually you can come up with good answers. You can come up with more than some questions have more than one answer.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so it is very possible that if a Jew would understand for the first time what is the Jewish question,
yep.
You know, he or she would be able to come with a good answer. And if this guy or a girl is a Zionist, he would come with one answer. And if he's an anti-Zionist or humanist, he may come with a different question.
Mm-hmm.
You know, for instance, when I talk to Israeli leftists, I spent the last week with an Israeli leftist, and it was very easy for me to confront him and eventually to prove to him that he is in a cognitive dissonance. You know, when you speak to Israelis, you know, they always like the Palestinians and they like to help, and once a week they go to Berlin and they work with the Arabs, but at the end of the day, they don't want the Arab to come to take their homes in Palestine, which is basically Tel Aviv and Haifa. So they do all this they're involved in this kind of endless righteous spiel with the hope that the Palestinian would fade away. And I confronted him and said, what kind of ethics you think that you try to sell? And then eventually admitted, listen, if I would be younger, I would do what you did, I would run away. Which was very interesting because he couldn't really present an argument, but at least for the first time in his life, he admitted to himself that is basically masturbating. Now, I don't need a third party to make me aware of the fact that I'm masturbating. I know when I'm doing it.
Some people do, though.
No, don't worry.
Well, I read your book, and I think it's an excellent book, and it's a unique book because no one else has written the kind of things that you have written and explained. It's essentially a very well explicated and reasoned anthropological study of the Jewish people. You know, nobody else goes there. You know.
Thank you so much. And you know what I realize now? It took me some time to admit it to myself, but you know, when I presented the book to friends of mine, they told me, "Listen, Gilad, this book is going to make an history," and it already did. But I understand now that my book is going to stay there as long as the Jews are there.
Yeah.
In 300, 400 years, when you want to understand the Jews, you will read Bernard Lazar and Gilad Atzmon. All the others, you know, like Shlomo Zahn is nice, but it's kind of particular to its kind of a chapter in history. Ilan Pappin is like a chapter, 1948 Jewish. You know, they are afraid to take on board the greater question. And I understand if you ask me what I did to the Jews, turn them into a philosophical question.
Mm-hmm.
This is
that's
what
what
I
it is.
This
That's
is
what
what
they
I
are.
did, and I'm very proud about it. And the more proud I am, the more upset they are. And
And do you have another one? Do you have? You said you're writing another book. Is that right? On
my next book is much more devastating.
excellent.
I'm going to do the same thing to the left.
To
the left, their obsession. I am going to expose the left as a Judified discourse, Talmudically oriented.
Yes.
And I'll show how their obsession with racism is because they are fundamentally and inherently racist. If they are clever, leftists listening to us now, I suggest that you jump to the water because I'm going to think.
You've got them in your sights.
Yeah, jump to the water now. It's safer.
All right, Gilad, listen, it's been really great talking to you.
Same here.
And maybe we'll do it again once your new book's out. There'll be another.
Don't wait. No. But I'm writing about it. The thing is that I thought that I finished it, and the more I dig, it's like
yeah.
That's the way it is. So I hope that it won't take me another 10 years now. But
yeah.
But I'm walking. But let me tell you that I read the bell curve. You know about the bell curve?
Which bell curve?
It's the name of the book.
Oh, yeah. Oh.
Yeah, and I was shocked. I really recommend anyone I can to read this book. It's an incredible scientific work. And what is shocking about it, it was published in 1994, and it is prophetic and describes exactly where America is now, segregation and cognitive partitioning. And when you realize that this book was demolished, burned by the left, makes it clear that it is actually the left that should be seen as complicit in the social disaster that we see, regarded as complicit, responsible, directly responsible for the social disaster that we see in the West, in America, in Britain, in France, and so on.
Okay. All right. Well, we're going to leave it there. So, listen, thanks again. And,
thank you so much.
Best of luck with, everything you do. And just watch out for... I'm big. If they want to take me, they have to bring more than one. More than one Mossad agent.
Yeah.
Gilad, it was really refreshing to hear you. It was a great pleasure. And as I told you in France, there's a lot of pressure with all those Zionist things going on.
I think that I'm giving a talk with Soral in Lyon on the 26th.
Oh, yeah?
26th.
That's my birthday.
Maybe we'll go.
That's my birthday. Maybe a sign.
This was okay. So I just have to make sure that it's happening.
Yeah.
Oh, hopefully.
We'll keep. It'll be on your website, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Nice one.
All
Bye-bye.
right, Gilad. Have a good night. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right, folks. We are ending it there. Back next week with another interview. I'm happy to be there. Until then, have a good one. Bye-bye. Bye.